So almost a year ago, our family moved here to Knoxville. It was a big move for us, leaving the New York, New Jersey area, because we had lived there over 30 years. Obviously, our personal and professional roots were deep. But for us, it was the right move at the right time to the right place. Of course, when you buy a home in an unfamiliar place, you do as much research as you can. You research the area, you hire a knowledgeable and resourceful realtor, and you drive through, which feels a little stalkerish, but you drive through the neighborhood that you're looking to buy at various times during the day and the night. Now, we did all of that, but until you actually move in, the issue of who lives next door or who lives across the street is left completely to chance. We were lucky. We hit the lottery, in fact. Almost immediately, people from our block started welcoming us when we moved in. The first day we were in a house, one neighbor brought over a loaf of banana bread which sustained us during those long hours of unpacking. 2 days later, the neighbors hosted a barbecue dinner to welcome us. After that, I told my husband, I guess we have to be social here. Others would stop by to chat while we were walking our dogs, and still others brought us up to speed on vital information, like when is garbage pickup and haircuts, where do we get those, and local restaurants to try. All of that launched the genuine relationships we have with our neighbors today, and we are most grateful for them. But as you know, there is no clause in that signed contract when you sign on the bottom line to buy your home that allows you to choose your neighbors. Now, the lawyer in Luke's gospel this morning was not happy about that. He didn't want to leave his neighbors to chance. And now the text tells us that he was testing Jesus, but I don't think he meant any real harm for Jesus. He was just a student of the law, of the Torah. And he was looking for those guardrails, those guidelines to direct his actions. He wanted a legal definition of a neighbor, something to define who his neighbor was, and by extension, make it clear who his neighbor was not. But by using the example of the Good Samaritan, Jesus went the other way. And instead of offering a restrictive definition of neighbor, he broadened it. He broadened it to include not just those of the lawyer's choosing, but to include those people on the fringes of his life, to include those in life's ditches, to include, shockingly and subversively, our enemies. That's right, the Samaritans and the Jews were bitter enemies. For generations, for centuries, for a millennia. Yet it was the Samaritan, as opposed to the well-respected religious professionals, the Levite and the priest, who extended his hand in compassion to the injured man. Jesus' definition of a neighbor included everyone. There didn't need to be a clause. In addition to defining one's relationship, one as a neighbor, this parable also describes how the Samaritan was moved by the man in the ditch. We hear that he saw the man and was moved with pity. Some translations use the word compassion here. And it's difficult for us to grasp the depth of the meaning of this word, because it's translated from Greek, and there really isn't a word in our English language that matches the word used in Greek. The Greek word translated into the English word compassion comes from the root splax. And it is what it sounds like. It's actually Greek for intestines, for your gut. So here Jesus was emphasizing that when the Samaritan entered into the man in the ditch's suffering, his gut was wrenched. It was ripped out for that man. Eugene Peterson, whose biblical translation, The Message, and uses a more modern colloquial English, and he wrote that the Samaritan's heart went out to him, meaning that he was so in tune, so empathetic toward the injured and vulnerable man that he was just gutted. His heart was yanked from its mooring inside its chest. Love like this goes way beyond just being nice. And compassion like this, love like this, is not just felt in the gut. It didn't just come there and land there and stay there. Importantly, it moved the Samaritan into action. Now, I have had a powerful sense of living out this parable ever since becoming a member here at Good Sam, because we are living it right now. Yes, in the present tense, we are living it as we welcome the refugee family, the Alabady family, to Knoxville. Our neighbors, of course, using Jesus' definition of the word, are not simply those who live on the streets where we live. Our neighbors are not simply people who look like us or worship like us or speak like us. Our neighbors are now this Muslim family, this Muslim refugee family, a mother, father, and 4 children from Iraq. They moved here just 3 months ago, traveling from Turkey, where, if you can imagine it, where they had lived in refugee camps for the 7 years prior to now. 7 years with 4 children. And like the parable of the Good Samaritan, the name of this church, obviously, we as a church have been moved to compassion. We feel it in our gut. And we have, as a result, developed a loving relationship with this family. Members of Good Sam met them at the airport, furnished their apartment, offered transportation to medical appointments and English classes, and provided cultural education. We provided cash in the plate, car repairs, art supplies, a piano so their house could be filled with music, companionship, and friendship. And my experience of being their neighbor, of seeing them and responding to their fatigue, their deep fatigue, their displacement, and their near constant confusion and frustration and vulnerability, has been both gut-wrenching and beautiful. That's the Good Samaritan kind of compassion with them. Sure, all of our faith journeys, our languages, food, and fashion preferences, they differ. But still, we are connecting at such a deeper level, that deep level of vulnerability. And at times, their vulnerability, literally, I feel like it rips my heart out. Because I do love them. I have compassion for them. I love being their neighbor here in Knoxville. The question, who is our neighbor, is perhaps the question of our time. Maybe it's the question of all time. And we are called to live out Jesus' teaching. A neighbor is one who scandalizes another with compassion. A neighbor is one who upends established categories and boundaries and shocks us with, get this, with the face of God. A neighbor is one who mercifully steps over the ancient bloody lines which separate us and them and teaches us the real meaning of good. All of these things are undoubtedly risky and radical because they involve crossing boundaries, taking uncertain steps. They involve making ourselves vulnerable. But they are also incredibly rewarding, and they are a faithful realization of God's kingdom in our midst. So, the lawyer wanted a definition. Here's one. Here's the definition Jesus gives through the story of the Good Samaritan. to open up pathways of love that weren't there before with a deep, wrenching compassion. Do this, Jesus says. Do this and you will live. Amen.